Good afternoon, ADRP Facebook fans. Welcome to Friday Live ADRP. As promised, we have the most famous drag racing publicist, Facebooker, YouTuber, selfie promoter, Mr. Wes Buck, Drag Illustrator. Good evening, Wes.
Hey, how are you, Brett? Thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate whenever you sent me the message and then called. I saw a number show up Australia. I was like, who is this? Who wants to talk to me from Australia? And so I'm very humbled. Thank you.
Oh, mate, it's our pleasure. We've been watching and admiring you from afar, and afar being the other side of the world, the work you're doing to make drag racing great again. And we're humbled and so greatly excited that you're with us today. So thanks so much for giving up your evening.
No problem. The pleasure is all mine. You got to bear with me because I got to share this on my personal page, right? I got to do all my normal deal.
Well, as we just touched on this morning when I spoke to you to get this organised, you're much more relaxed and much more fluid than I am. So I think everyone who's seen you and your show is used to you messing around and answering the phone and doing three other things at once. So
unfortunately, yeah, it comes with a little bit of time, Brett. Give it a little bit of time. You seem pretty comfortable doing this. Don't you worry. Yeah, you didn't. Now, if I just cannot spill my coffee or tear up my car, we'll be in tall cotton.
All right, cool. All right, so for those who don't know the Wes Buck and Drag Illustrated story, can you give us the 90-second snapshot of who you are, where you came from, and what you're doing at the moment?
Oh, 90 seconds. Man, that's a big challenge, Brett. I liken myself a fast-moving guy, but the long story is really I just love drag racing. I've been around drag racing my entire life. Ever since I was a little bitty kid. I always say that I was at the drag strip 9 days before I was born in my mother's womb, and I've pretty well been there ever since. And I grew up, my dad owns an auto repair shop, and I've just always been around cars. And my dad raced every weekend of warm weather. So every night of the week we were working on the race car, and every weekend we were gone drag racing. So in the years to follow as a high school aged kid, all I really want to do is go drag racing. And I'm not exactly sure how do you go to work in drag racing? So I tried all sorts of different things and ended up the manager of a little 8th Mile drag strip in Iowa, here in the United States, at the age of 21. At the time, I was the youngest IHRA track operator that there had ever been. And it was a really great experience for me, to be honest. I learned a tremendous amount, made a lot of great friends, and learned a little bit about the inner workings of drag racing as a business. On the heels of that, basically the track changed hands. It was time for me to look for something new to do. And I looked around and I felt like drag racers like my dad and drag racers like the guys that raced at my track were poorly represented in the media. I take a little bit I get myself in trouble, but it's almost like if you weren't sponsored by the U.S. Army or Castrol, you weren't going to get a story written about you. And I knew how hard all these guys worked. And I know the sacrifice and the money and everything that it takes to go drag racing. And I thought, you know what? We should start a drag racing magazine that caters exclusively to the weekend warrior grassroots drag racer. And because that's who I am and that's who I care about. And here we are, man. 11 years later, I think a combination of fate, timing, and hard work has brought us to this point. It's been the effort, the efforts of many have got us here, and people really responded well to it. Not being tied to any sanctioning body, the NHRA, the IHRA, the ADRL, or the whatever the case may be. It was being free to talk about drag racing of all types. I really think that's been our golden ticket, so to speak. Okay. And yeah, I hope, I know that was more than 90 seconds, Brett. I apologize. But that's the gist of it, man. Here we are.
Okay, so you've really embraced what we're doing here today, the split screen. You're actually, it's so cool that we were able to get you for today. This is our official first ADRP split screen Facebook Live. Nicole's only just got the software organized you break. So you're the first one we're doing this with. So I'm really happy about that because you've really embraced taking the magazine to the new level, the new world. Your website, email, digital version of your magazine, your crazy Facebook lives and selfie interviews with the guys. You've stepped into this world, but you've brought the magazine, the print magazine with you.
Yeah, I think honestly, for me, I really wanted to make sure that I liken myself an entrepreneur above all else. And I didn't want to be the guy that didn't embrace technology. I never wanted to be the guy that, you know, made VHS tapes and the DVDs come along and I just closed the doors, you know. And I really felt like it's been an interesting time for publishing, you know, with the advent of the internet and the social media revolution and all the things that have happened, the digital publishing revolution. It's for guys like me that I really feel the people who have grown or prospered during this interesting time for publishers have been the people who have embraced it. And what I've found is that we have people like my aforementioned father, like a lot of drag racers that only read Drag Illustrated in print. The only time they hear from Wes Buck is when our magazine shows up in their mailbox. Then we have other people that don't even subscribe to the magazine and primarily engage with us via Facebook Live or via our email newsletter or via our website, dragillustrated.com. I kind of realized that the way we could be the most powerful and to kind of plug our own little movement here, the best thing we could do to make drag racing great again is to use them all, to use everything to the fullest of their potential. So I like to believe that we at Drag Illustrated are the best storytellers in drag racing. And we'll tell that story however people want it. If they want it in print, if they want it in paper and ink, by God, we'll give it to them. If they want it in their email inbox, we'll give it to them. If they want it on their Facebook newsfeed, we'll give it to them.
That's very cool. Sorry, I got totally distracted. Lee Sebring wants to know how much for a Wes Buck autograph.
For you, Lee, like, I don't know, free. How about that? Next time I'll see you in the spring, buddy. Don't you worry.
So back to what you were saying, it is really cool that you've embraced all of that. We spoke. Sorry, I'll go back. You talk about your dad. I'm 49, so I'm a bit older than you, and therefore I guess a bit younger than your dad. We speak to drag racers out here a lot. You and I spoke about the average age of a drag racer today when we were talking. The amount of guys we've got one print magazine out here, Drag News. They do an electronic and they do a print, and Dragster magazine is no longer at the moment. And the older guys want to touch, feel, hold a physical magazine. There's no doubt about it. You know, we spoke this morning, I've got folders full of Super Stock and Drag Illustrated magazines that I would religiously buy as a 18, 19-year-old. And I still go to them and look at stuff and because Pro Modified is my passion in drag racing. I mean, drag racing is second only to my family, but if I have to pick something within drag racing, it's Pro Mod. And you know, watching the Charles Carpenters and the Robbie Vandegrift's and then the blown cars come along with the Scotty Cannons and the Bill Coolman. I couldn't wait for the magazine to get to the newsstand. I've lived through where I was 19, 20, waiting for that magazine to get to the newsstand, and now I'm talking live with Wes Buck from the other side of the planet, and we're digitalizing that out to the world.
It's great.
We've come a long way in my lifetime.
I'm shocked by it all the time. I mean, yesterday is a great example. We had probably our most successful Facebook Live that we've ever done yesterday, and it's amazing that we can engage with that many people via the internet. But I gotta say, and I'm gonna sound like a salesman, but the engagement level, it's funny because we're all slaves to these things, I think. And we'll see these numbers, 125,000 people, 125,000 views. And we all go, oh my gosh, all these people watched my thing, but then you go dig deep and you realize that, well, like 125,000 people saw it for 3 seconds, and that's where Drag Illustrated, the printed version, comes in. Because when people get Drag Illustrated magazine and they read it, they don't read it for 3 seconds. They don't rapid fire through that thing. They sit down and they engage with it. And that's why we still, to this day, have very little, if any, concern about the health of our printed property, because it's just a different experience. In this day and age, we are all inundated with screens and notifications. You guys probably just heard one come through on my computer just now. And it's just constant buzz and ding and da-ding or whatever, flashing lights. And to be able to sit down in your lazy boy or your recliner at night and open a magazine, I just don't really feel like there's any replacing that experience. And great magazines, I truly believe, will stand the test of time no matter what technology comes our way in the next few years or has already. And for guys like you and me, there's no feeling like seeing your car or your pass in a magazine. We had 2 or 3 of them today. I had people sending me pictures of framed versions of the most recent issue of Drag Illustrated, because it's just, for a car guy, it's the ultimate badge of honor, right? To see your car or your kid packing your parachute or whatever it is. I've had guys call me that were getting ready to throw in the towel. Man, we had a crappy season. I'm about done. Then we run a 2-page spread in the magazine of their car up on the wheelie bars with 4-foot header flames coming out of it. And they go, you know what? It's all worth it. I'm going to go ahead and buy a new motor from Pat Musey or whatever. I've seen guys do that or build a new car. So there's nothing quite like it. Lee Sebring's chiming in right now. And it's I think drag racers, we're slaves to our own ego, right? We're slaves to our own ambitions. And I think there's something validating about the printed word that's just really impossible to replicate. I have someone ask me every day, and this, I say this very humbly. I am very humbled and forever blessed that people care about Drag Illustrated at all. And I mean that sincerely. But there's not a day that goes by we don't have someone want us to do a story in the magazine. Hey, will you do a story about my car? My X275 car? Will you do a story about my business? I've never had anybody ask me once to do something on our website. Not once. Never.
Wow.
And I think that it's just, there's something different about it. And that's not to play down the power of websites, but it's just a different deal, Sorry, I ramble. That's what I do.
That's good. So, I might be going to a secret spot here. You just talked about the magazine, and we've talked about what we're doing right now, Facebook, the internet, website. You just talked about how the magazine seems to have that more alluring appeal. But you told me this morning about, with what you're doing on Facebook and live, the impact that's had on the hard copy print.
Absolutely. It feels like I'm making this up, and I'm sure you thought I was when I told you this, but our subscription sales for our printed drag racing magazine are up 73.5% over 2015. From 2015 to 2016, the subscriptions to our printed version of Drag Illustrated are up 73.5%. And I have to say that you leveraging the power of the internet has been a part of that, and a huge part of it. I feel like we built our brand in print. I've often said that I feel our flag flies higher in the digital space because of the foundation we built in print. I think my fellow business owners in the automotive space, they know that I'm not like some kid in the basement of my grandparents' house with an internet connection that's got a blog. We have a real business that spends money. We buy a booth at PRI. We contribute. We participate in the industry. We go to races. We try to be a real functioning member of the industry. And that's something that I think that comes with the brick and mortar business. But now that we've moved into this digital space, I think it means a little bit more to be on the Drag Illustrated Facebook page, the Drag Illustrated Facebook live show, on our website. All those things mean a little bit more because we have the printed magazine, you know?
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. The synergy is giving you more than the sum of the individual parts.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well said, Brett. Look at that.
Oh, thank you. So I could talk to you all day about what you do, what we do, the synergies, the internet, the power of people now. But I want to jump around a little bit and talk about maybe some stuff that'll get up on the fire a little bit.
Yeah, I like this.
I haven't pre-warned you about this one. One of your lives, you had Kenny Nolling making his comeback, and you were very reticent, perhaps, and respectful, but you were very reserved. Hey, Kenny, what's the deal? Basically, show me the money was sort of how it came across on the other side of the planet. We didn't know the ins and outs as much as you guys did. And he said, we'll be there, we'll be at PRI, we'll have security guards, we'll have a bucket full of cash, and we'll pay everyone. Now, from the other side of the planet, and that's why I want your opinion, that didn't quite go to plan. I know his wife ended up having a baby, so that was pretty mad. But there was no cash, there was no security guards, there were checks, there were non-disclosure agreement signatures, there was all sorts of stuff the following days about checks that were rubbery, that weren't rubbery. I love Kenny. I think he's revolutionised drag racing in one way. He certainly knows how to fill the stands, much like your man Donald. Tell us what's going on.
To be 100% honest, I don't know all the inner workings of it. And we had Kenny on the show because I felt like I wanted to hear Kenny say in front of a massive, what I felt would be a large audience, acknowledge that we were going to right this wrong. Because one of the biggest steps towards making drag racing great again is paying racers. I've been on both sides of that fence, and I've been a racer that's been cheated. I've been the race promoter that's had to write a check that was going to hurt. As a race promoter, there were several times that I had, really bad weather forecast or horrible spectator turnouts, but by God, you pay the racers. Those guys are out there risking their lives, burning up their bank accounts, to put on a show for you, and paying those guys is of utmost importance to Wes Buck and Drag Illustrated and this whole thing. Racers are who we care about the most. And I do believe that a lot of those debts have been paid. I spoke to probably 8 to 10 different racers who were written checks that cashed, that cleared the bank. And that was great news. That was news to me. And I felt like by hearing that, I didn't need to call everyone. I had enough people tell me, people that I know and trust and have a lot of respect for, their checks cleared, and I felt good about it. I'll be honest, and I haven't spoken to Kenny since PRI, just the holiday and everything that's been going on. I don't wish anyone, I want everybody, I've said this to you, Brett, from whether it's in Australia or here, I want to see the sport of drag racing grow. For me and for you and for everybody, because I don't want more cheese off the pizza that already exists. I want the pizza to be bigger for everybody. I want everybody to be able to do more. And I want Kenny to be successful. I really do. I think that there's a limited inventory of high-level Pro Mod cars, and that's a discussion that we can have at another date. I'm happy to talk about. Sure. But I certainly want to see Kenny, whatever he does, do well. I wouldn't wish ill on anyone, and I hope no one would do that to me. I will say that I'm ready to see the sport move on from this. I've had a lot of people ask me about this, and I haven't spoken on it a whole lot publicly, so you're getting a little bit, you juiced me a little, Brett. But my opinion is really that I'm just ready to see the sport as a whole. I'm sorry, my Safari just crashed. I'm ready to see the sport as a whole move on from it. I'm sure Kenny feels that way. I certainly know I feel that way. And the thing I didn't like about PRI is that we threw this knockdown drag out party that was standing room only. there are all these positive things going on. Sponsorships are being signed left and right, and all this stuff's going on. And I don't want to talk about security guards. I don't want to talk about bad news, man. And I've said this before, like, Will Ferrell says, like, ELE, everybody love everybody, right? Like, I want to see positivity. There's tons of good stuff going on. Let's not dwell on the one or two little things that, no matter where you're at on it, let's just choose to be the bigger person. It's like being the tough guy at the bar. Like, you can choose whether to fight this guy and whoop his butt or not, or be the bigger guy. And I want to choose to be the bigger guy. And I think the sport of drag racing is in a freaking awesome place right now. I think the industry's in an awesome place right now. I'm waiting to see what happens, just like everybody else. I'm interested to see what's going to happen next. And I wish the ADRL and anybody that launches a drag racing organization in 2017 or anywhere in the future, rocking and rolling, man. I'm tired of the drama. I've been going to PRI for 11 or 12 years now. And I'm tired of talking about it. That's my main thing. If I have one pet peeve, man, it's like, let's move on. Let's all move forward. And that's kind of how I feel about it, man. But I'm a big fan of 8th Mile, Pro Mod, Door Slammer racing. So, and I'll tell you this, running 340s and 350s is hard, monumentally expensive, monumentally challenging to do. I'm sure, I don't know if you followed, Keith Haney has an ongoing thread going on Facebook about trying to establish, I'm here in the Midwest United States, Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, Kansas, of course, Oklahoma. There is a need for a feeder series, and that's not a disparaging term. There is a need for a feeder series or something else that can, support the PDRA, because I think the PDRA has turned the corner. They've stood the test of time. Jason Scruggs, Tommy Franklin, everybody that's involved in that deal, Bob Harris, man, they've done exactly what they said they were going to do. And I'm a really big fan of what they're doing. They've been great to Drag Illustrated. We're kind of heavily invested in their success. But I think if we're going to try to run Pro Extreme 340, 350 Pro Extreme 20 times a year, we've got a real problem. Yeah, we've got a real problem, similar to what you guys would have if we tried to run a top door slammer race, every night of the week or every Friday and Saturday at the 3 major tracks in Australia. It'd be a struggle, and I think we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there. But that's pretty much all I know about that situation, man. Okay,
so you mentioned Jason. We were lucky enough to get an interview with him a little while ago. He's such a great guy. He's so easy to talk to. Super fast car. You did an interview with him, I think, in his trailer, and he was talking about that he went 5.51 at 198 over the quarter.
Yeah,
turning it off at about 700 or 800 feet.
Yeah, and I interviewed him in Memphis. I remember it was like 400 degrees out and like 150% humidity, and I asked him to do an interview, and I was just thrilled that he was going to let us do it in his trailer because I knew they had the air on because it was so hot. But Jason is somebody who has I can't really say enough about him. He's a legendary racer. We've talked off the air, Brett, about both of our kind of affinity for real deal racers. And Jason is one of those guys. He's a guy that's been a hero of mine since day one. He's been good to me when he had no reason to be good to me. I met Jason in October of 2006 in Kennedale, Texas, at Texas Raceway. And he had no reason to talk to me, no reason to treat me well. And he literally would have done anything I asked of him. We spent 2 hours taking pictures of him and his dad and his car. And this was at a time in 2006 when a lot of racers, especially in the door slammer world, weren't really familiar with like photo shoots. And that was part of the reason we started Drag Illustrated, because I wanted to put faces to the names on the windows, right? Because most everybody in the world knew what Jason Scruggs' little red 63 Corvette looked like with a 400-inch small block Chevy in it and a screw blower, but no one knew what Jason looked like, and we wanted to solve that problem. And we set out to do it, and Jason is someone who, for reasons unbeknownst to me, has treated me like gold since day one. And is a large part of the reason I love being a part of drag racing, because there are so many guys like Jason, you know. Great guy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm sure he's a good judge of character, mate. So I'm sure he saw in you that you were trying to make that pie bigger, and if he could help in any way, he would be helping you make that pie bigger. So, but are they talking about going 330s now? They're talking about going 230 mile an hour in the 8th.
I think that Jason and I have had some pretty candid conversations about it. I don't think those cars are going to go. I think some physics come into play. I think that if we see those cars dip much further into the 340, would you agree, Nate? I've got one of Nate Van Wagenen, my right-hand man here at Drag Illustrated. He writes a lot of the stories in the magazine, hanging out with me tonight late in the office. I think if anybody goes faster than Brandon Snyder's 348 this year, it won't be much. I don't think it'll be a whole lot. I think the cars are going to consistently dip into that 220 mile an hour range, crest that 220 mile per hour mark. Mid 340s, it's going to be a little while before they go much faster than that. But the thing about drag racing is some new technology comes along, be it torque converter technology, some of the electronics that are available to drivers and teams now. Things happen and big jumps happen. It seems like we do this. Lee's chiming in. The twin turbo record's 230. I think with the screw blown combinations or whatever, the screw blown, the Hemi deal, I think we're going to see him running that 220 range or whatever for the foreseeable future. It's but it happens fast. It doesn't take much for a trick to come along or something. It wasn't that long ago. The thing I think that I'm the most surprised about with Pro Extreme and Pro Nitrous, if we want to talk about like outlaw 8th mile door slammers, is the consistency. You heard on our show yesterday, Steve Matusik and I bantering back and forth about, wishing all these cars had clutches in them and stuff like that. But the consistency would not be there. I mean, it just would not be. There's so many more variables. There's air gap, clutch discs, there's so many things to play with. There's so many more variables that I think the converter deal has really blessed us all with super badass, consistent side-by-side runs that we would likely otherwise not have. Because it wasn't that long ago that it was world record, barrel roll, or broadside, basically. You know what I mean? There was very little in between, and now we see guys making consistent runs, and there's a ton of people responsible for that. I mean, all these torque converter companies that work tirelessly, and that's the thing that I think I have to say, or kind of, I would be remiss not to say that running one of these converter cars isn't easy. I mean, that deal's hard, and if you want to be really good at it, it's even more challenging. So it's just a different thing. It's just a different challenge.
Converters are certainly starting to come on over here. We've got the Bray boys who you interviewed at SEMA or PRI, I can't remember which one. And they've just signed a new deal with Gulf Western Oil. So they're coming back in a really big way to drag racing. And awesome. We interviewed Victor at the top end at the Winter Nationals last year. And to quote him, I think verbatim his words, I said, "So you've gone to a converter now?" And he goes, yeah, we've got to make it work. Benny's working out. He's pretty good on them. I said, "So that's it, converters?" And he goes, "Brett, we sold all the clutches. We have to make it work." So it's, you've got the Brays all on converter. We interviewed Jeff Cuttajar the other day, Peter Kapiris' crew chief, big time hitter out here, and they've just gone to a converter drive. You and I spoke this morning about Stewie Bishop, converter drive car with, I've had a mental blank, isn't that terrible? Daniel tuning the car and working through that converter. As you said, so technology. To go back a step for a second, you talk about, it sort of flatlines for a little while and then there's a blip.
Yeah.
Before Jimmy Prock laid the headers back, if I had told you that a funny car was going to go 332 mile an hour, you would have told me I was an idiot.
Absolutely. And it takes one guy that thinks outside of the box and is ready to try something. And I just spoke a little bit ago with Todd Tutterow. I mean, a couple of hours ago, I was talking to Todd just about how far these converter drives have come over the course of the last few years. A lockup torque converter deal was crazy talk just a few years ago. And now it's common practice in Pro Mod. And it's the same with like the laid back headers. And it's probably there's a lot of cool things about drag racing, but all the mad scientists that exist in this sport, it keeps it pretty exciting. I mean, very rarely is there a dull moment, because I think a lot of these classes, especially like heads up drag racing, there's just enough freedom allowed that guys can try stuff, and it only takes one thing working out. And like you said, you got 330 plus mile per hour funny cars, which, you know, a few years ago would have been like reason enough to shut down the NHRA, right? I mean, like, oh my God, 330 mile an hour funny cars, we got to pull the plug on all this, you know.
Yeah,
and
now it's 700 feet instead of 1,000 feet. Now you touched on mad science. We spoke a little earlier. We've got sidetracked, strangely. These 8-mile monsters, these extreme cars. You said, you know, they're now going down the track. You and Steve had a little chat yesterday about, you know, how much drive has been taken away by all the new electronics. You've touched again on, we're drag racers. If we can buy something, make something, tune something to make it go faster, we're always going to do that. Where's the balancing line between making them, I think, you know, it was Frankie Taylor might have said, they want to make them remote control. We need the drivers to be drivers. The guy on the hill needs to be scared of these cars. Where's the line?
I unfortunately, I think in some regards we're over it. I think we're beyond the line. And someone had some very astute words on my live feed yesterday. I think it was Mark Walters from MotorManiaTV.com. Mark said, you can't put that technology genie back in the bottle. And I think that's kind of true. I think my go-to analogy, and I've said this yesterday, so I apologize for repeating myself, but I've been saying this for like 10 years, is that I don't feel like I should be able to buy tennis shoes that it would allow me to compete on the basketball court with Michael Jordan or LeBron James or anybody else. And I think that in drag racing, to some extent, that exists, where I can go, if I've got the resources, I can go buy the parts, pieces, and equipment and people to go out and compete with Jason Scruggs or Steve Matusik. And, you know, and I don't think I mean, Jason Scruggs is a insanely famous farmer. I mean, I don't think I could, I mean, I couldn't buy the stuff to go compete with him in that regard, right? There's got to be that secret sauce, you know, and I don't like to see guys like Jason's talent, experience, work ethic. I don't like to see those things negated. Yeah. And technology can do that. But Steve also very astutely, Matusik made the great point that our inventory of cars would be much, much lesser than it is. Because guys got to start somewhere, right? I mean, not everybody can have been racing pro mods for 100 years. And I don't want to say anything that comes off as negative, you know, because I think the sport of drag racing right now, the NHRA Pro Mod Series is turning cars away, right? I mean, there are more cars. Gainesville, the first race of the season, is full. And it's amazing the quality and the number of people we have involved. But I think that's why it's important that we have these, you know, feeder series, and it's important. There's a regional series in the Midwest, and there's a regional series in the West Coast, and a regional series on the East Coast. And not to preach pro mod, but something that I think one of the reasons pro mod, besides just being awesome, the cars being awesome, the people being awesome, and everything about it being awesome, I think pro mod is like the universal language of drag racing. Have you ever thought about that? Like, they race mods. I mean, they race pro mods in the United States. They race pro mods in Canada. They race pro mods in Australia, in England, Sweden, Norway, France, Russia, the Middle East, like every other day in the Middle East. And it's pro mod just, I think, is the universal language of the sport. And it's a class that I would like to see grow and grow and grow, because I think it's massively relatable. There's people all over the world that are interested in it. And I can keep on going, but you probably want me to pull the chutes here pretty quick, right?
That's all right. That's all right. So you touched on technology. That sort of segues us into something else I wanted to talk to you about, was the technology available to the kids today. I gave you a quick education on the Ford 6-cylinder engine over here in Australia this morning. You literally can go to the store, buy one of these Turbo Falcon cars, family 4-door sedan, take it down the corner, they put a chip and a tune in it, and the car will run 10. It'll run 9s if you go really after it. And you can still let your wife drive it to the corner shop to buy the milk. So it's, guys with, I used to have a 12.5-to-1 compression crane mechanical camshaft 4500 series Holly on a small block Chev, and the thing made like 460 horsepower, and I thought it was a rocket. Now these kids are making 1,000 horsepower in a family car.
Well, part of the reason earlier in 2016, we launched a new magazine, Street Race Magazine, as a sister publication to Drag Illustrated, specifically to cater to the people you're talking about now. It's not at all unusual for someone to have 1,000 horsepower daily driver. Right. It's not at all unusual to see a car make 1,000 horsepower to the tire, get 25 miles per gallon, run on E85, have ice cold air conditioning and a killer stereo, leather interior and power options. That's not at all unusual. And run 9s in the quarter mile. In the 80s, you'd have had to have 514 gears and a 13.5-to-1 big block Chevy with open headers to make something run like that. And technology has taken car culture just unbelievable. It's really crazy. But as we've talked, I think it's something that the higher levels of drag racing, our sanctioning bodies and the people that steer our sport really have to be paying attention to, because the thing that concerns me is I don't want to see that kid that puts a pulley and a tune and an exhaust system and a set of drag radials on his new Corvette or his Coyote Mustang. I want to see that kid go to the drag strip. And I don't want him to. I don't want to see him turned to the local blacktop or the local, the local, construction site where there's some etched concrete poured, or industrial area, making passes in that thing because they won't let him run it at the drag strip without a funny car cage and a parachute. So I do think there's going to have to be a happy medium established somewhere for guys like you're talking about in Australia and all these late model high performance guys, because I'm one of them. I'm a guy I've got a 10-year-old Corvette, but it runs good, and I don't want to put a cage in it. I want my little boy to be able to crawl in and out of it, and I want my wife to be able to go take it to Sonic to the drive-in with me, and I don't want to turn it into a race car, but I also want to be able to go torture it at the drag strip. I don't want to go torture it on the local blacktop. I want to go torture it at the racetrack. So it's a really interesting conversation, I think.
Yeah, well, it's timing is perfect for that conversation. In Australia this weekend, we have the Summer Nats on in our nation's capital, Canberra, and there will be over 100,000 people go through the gates over 3 or 4 days. And none of these guys are drag racers, but they are a drag racing demographic. They've got $100,000 cars. The burnout cars over here, burnout's not a big scene over there, I don't believe, but over here we're mad for a burnout car. And these guys have got 500+ inch engines, aluminum heads, roller camshafts, PSI superchargers to fry a 175 60/15 tire. And how do we get them to come and race it at the track when they've got $100,000 invested, and we're saying, no, your car's no good, take it away, because it hasn't got 2 parachutes, it hasn't got a funny car roll cage, it hasn't got. But we've also got a duty of care to protect him from himself. If that car's going to go 180 mile an hour, there has to be some safety involved.
Absolutely. I mean, I recently made a 160 mile per hour pass in my car and 158 mile an hour pass in my car, with no chute or anything like that. And I quickly realized how badly I need a parachute. You know, and I won't run my car again until I do, you know what I mean? Because it took all we had to get that old girl slowed down, you know? And I'm going, and I do think we do have a responsibility, as a kind of a streetcar guy my whole life. This has been an ongoing discussion that I've had for what seems like 100 years. There's just a balance that I think has to be established. There's some sort of happy medium where we can keep a guy from having to put a funny car cage in his car, or a 12-point roll cage, or a 10-point cage even, and still go race it. There's got to be a happy medium, because I do see, I'm a safety guy. I'm a safety advocate. And I've seen plenty of guys, when I went and ran my car, I had a Hans device on, the baddest ass helmet I could get, a fire jacket, fire pants, gloves. I was trying to be as safe as I could, because I have a family, you know, I have responsibilities. I have teams here. You know, I have people, I've got to think beyond myself. Right. And so I'm an advocate of safety, but I do think there's a balance to be had. There's some sort of happy medium to be had. I'm not saying that I have all the answers, but I will tell you this. I could find the people that would answer those questions. And I think that that's what we've got to be doing, is we've got to be answering those questions, and we got to be finding smart people that can answer those questions and figure out what that happy medium is. Because as part of our Street Race magazine, I'm going to airports and some of these airstrip races, these half-mile races, these roll races, some of these king of the concrete type events, where the no prep events. And we need to be preaching safety to these people. We need to be pushing it, but we need to not make it so stringent that we're turning people away from the drag strip. So it's a tough thing, Brett. I really think, I mean, it's a tough challenge for all of us, but it's a challenge that I know that I'm completely comfortable talking about. I applaud guys like you. And you deserve a pat on the back, Brett, because these conversations have to be had. And I don't think a lot of people want to have them. They certainly don't want to have them live on the internet. Right. And I think that we got to have these conversations, and we got to keep these things out there, and we got to keep the sport moving forward. And it requires discussion, man. It requires opinions and thoughts. And so we'll get it figured out. Give us a couple nights to figure it out.
Yeah, we'll get onto that on another call. We've gone way over what I told you we were going to already. Jimmy Bradshaw's just commented about insurance companies are the happy medium, and that's what some of the people we've been talking to, some of the research we've done. It's all about the insurance policy. If you can insure it, you can run it. And then it just comes down to a cost. So we were lucky here a couple of years ago on the back of something I think NHRA did. The late model stuff out here now with, as you quoted, the 17 airbags and all the gear inside. Those guys can run down to 10.0 now without a cage, without a tech inspection, just standard, you know, roadworthy and relatively safe type of car. The drama then is that because over here we have models that stretch over the time frame of what they're allowed. So I think I can't remember exactly, Wes, it's 2008 on or something like that is allowed to run 10.0, and pre-2008 it's only around 11.0. So you've got a 2006 model and I've got a 2009 model. They look identical, but because there has to be a line drawn in the sand, one of us can't race and one of us can down as low as 10. And then you've got a guy who's got that big block and in an old GM or Ford product, and he's like, well, hang on, how come I can't run 10.0 when that one can? And it's a ball of wax. It's going to take a lot of working out.
It does, you know, and I don't know that we're going to present, you know, the answer tonight. I just think that it's something that, like I said, I think these discussions have to have. And the only thing that I feel, and the only thing I would like to ever see addressed, is that I do believe that a lot of the principles and rules and founding thoughts they were just developed in the 60s or whatever, right? And I just think that we have to be willing to acknowledge that times have changed, things have changed, cars have changed, people have changed, everything's changed, and we have to be willing to change with the times, or at least acknowledge that, hey, sometimes we gotta try some stuff. We gotta look at things, and we can't just do. I think it was Brian Loans at Bang Shift, and I know this is like a famous quote, but I was most recently made aware of it once again, was the most dangerous words in the English language are because that's how we've always done it. And I think that's some smart stuff right there. I don't like that. Because that's how he's always done it. That's definitely not the right way.
Well, that's the I guess the distilled version of human nature. The scariest thing for a human is change.
Absolutely.
It takes a whole power of managing to get people to change a mindset, to change the way it's always been done, whatever the case. And we're missing a generation or two now in drag racing because they're going to drifting, they're going to burnouts, they're going to the stuff you were talking about, roll starts and half-mile time trials, because drag racing is too hard for them. We haven't kept up and allowed them to fit in without cutting the car up or spending a whole bunch more money.
I agree. I mean, the thing that I've seen, and my goal or my thought is that the thing I like the most about a lot of roll racing here in the United States takes a beating, like on the internet and everywhere, because it is admittedly a dumbed down version of drag racing. I mean, there's just no real way around it. However, to be able to take your car with 20-inch wheels on it and a low profile drag radial or whatever the case may be, to be able to go and race that car, take it straight off the street and competitively race it is really cool. And a lot of guys just don't have the mechanical wherewithal, the tools, any of the other stuff that's required to go, drive their car to the track, jack it up, put slicks on it. Maybe they can't afford a set of weld wheels, right? To slap on a set of massive drag radials, Mickey Thompson drag radials. And I think it's important that we give those guys a place to go race and get bit, because my hope is the guy that goes to the local airport race or whatever and runs his new Corvette. I hope that guy, my goal with like Street Race Magazine is to pour fuel on that fire, to get that guy to enjoy that thrill and that side-by-side competition and that camaraderie and that community so much that he goes and buys a rear-engine dragster and starts bracket racing at his local drag strip, and then buys a top sportsman car and an old nitrous motor and goes racing for a couple of years, and then has a really successful business and decides to go pro mod racing. I mean, I think that we have to create a pathway for organic growth in drag racing. Not everybody's just going to be a born billionaire or whatever with a be an adrenaline junkie rich person that's going to go buy a nitro car or go buy a pro mod car. We've got to create a pathway and water those seeds. We got to create a pathway for organic growth, because the next John Force or the next Yanni Lindbergh is not created in Nitro Funny Car. The next Yanni Lindbergh, the next Steve Matusik, the next whoever, Jason Scruggs, starts with a Fox Body Mustang, starts with even if they are well-to-do and their mom and dad bought them a new Vet or whatever, or a new Mustang. You're not going to hear me say Mustang much. But if even if that's the case, we've got to water that plant, right? We've got to create a pathway for organic growth, and it starts with these streetcar guys. I love them. They don't often get the credit they deserve, because I've met plenty of guys with, late model streetcars that have worked tirelessly on it, done it all in their driveway, or done it all in the, done it all in the garage of their house, that type of thing, man. It's, anyways, that's kind of my opinion on it. I think we got to, and I will say, Brett, that go to your local drag radial race. come over here sometime, because I'm hoping that, I hope to end up in Australia at some point soon. Love to have you over here one of these days. But you go to like a drag radio race, you go to Donald's race coming up in a couple of weeks, Lights Out 8, February, at South Georgia Motorsports Park. Lee will be there. Dude, it's flat bill hats, Dickie shorts, high top sneakers. It's a sea of young people. And I tell people that all the time. When I have the kind of, not naysayer, but when I have someone tell me that the drag racing fan base is graying or they're old and dead, and the reason there were less people at the drag races this year than last is because most of them died. Well, you haven't been to a freaking drag radio race. You haven't been to a streetcar takeover event. You haven't been to a no prep race. You're just looking in the wrong spot. You go to Donald Long's race. You go to Tyler Crossnose race in Memphis. You go to Huntsville for Radio Fest. I'm telling you what, you won't see a bit brim in the building. You won't see one pair of Wranglers. You know what I mean? I mean, it's young kids with freaking like the earmuff, headphones on. I mean, it's cool dude after cool dude after cool dude. And for me, it's a huge reminder, and that's why I look forward to going to Ducks race in February, because it's a great way to start my season of going, all right, here's a hardcore reminder that drag racing is alive and well, because there's too many people here. You know what I mean? This place feels dangerous. And it's, so anyways, that's drag racing. There's young people in it. They're just, the people that don't see them are looking in the wrong spots.
So are we going to bring those kids through to Pro Mod, to NHRA, or are they going to stay in that duck world, in the maybe PDRA world?
Man, that's a good question. I don't know. I tell you what, I've talked to a lot of these guys. I mean, I've often thought, does Steve Petty end up working on a nitro car someday? Does Josh Ledford end up working on a nitro car someday? I'm going to say no. I think that they're happy where they're at. I don't think that, and I've got to be careful here because I'm going to go against my own self, right? I'm going to go against my own desire to always be positive. But I think that the nitro dream has wavered a little bit. I think there was a time when guys, dreamed of going nitro racing, much like what's going on in pro stock right now. I think guys used to salivate over going pro mod racing someday. We're going to buy we're going to buy so-and-so's old car, and we're going to go together and buy us a 500-inch motor and get a Liberty and a couple different gear sets, and by God, we're going to go pro stock racing. Well, that dream is completely imploded. You need a freaking army of people, a machine shop. You need $40 billion worth of stuff to go pro stock racing now. And I think that's happened, before that, but before it happened in pro stock, it happened in fuel racing. And I think what's going on in pro mod and drag radio racing is the dream is still alive. Like me and my kid brother,
pro mod together in my garage.
Yeah, me and my kid brother can sit around and think, even though we're crazy, we can think we're going to go run Radio versus the world one of these days. Man, we're going to do that. We're going to be, we're going to run X275. If we, maybe we can get a couple other guys to go in with us on a motor, and we can get Pro Charger to give us a blower, and we can get some tires, and by God, we're going to have an X275 car. Well, I think the dream is still alive, and I think so long as that dream is still alive, all these big name tuners and all these big name drivers, they're going to stay where that dream is alive and well. I do think we're seeing this last season was the first time in a while that I've had guys like Keith Berry, Fletcher Cox, different guys, Daniel Ferris, different guys tell me that they wanted to get a Pro Mod car. So I do think that we'll see some of these guys from Radio vs. the World and X275. I wouldn't be surprised to see them in Pro Mod. But I can tell you this, and I don't mean to speak for Danny, but Danny Rowe is one of my he's been a longtime mentor of mine for about 10, 11 years now. He's one of my closest friends in the world. Danny has talked about going – Danny has no desire to do anything more than Pro Mod race. For Danny Rowe, pro mod is the top of the heap, you know, and I think there are a lot of guys that feel that way. You know, no aspirations to go funny car racing, no aspirations to go top fuel racing. Pro mod is where he wants to be. And I think that's a lot of these door slammer guys, pro mod's like the final frontier, you know?
Got to have doors and springs.
Agreed, man. Agreed.
Mate, I've taken way more time than I asked you for. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna go
I
put my
could stay here for another 2 hours and talk to you. It's great listening to you.
Well, Brett, I appreciate it so much. I can't even believe we're talking. What time is it in Australia?
It's just about to go 1 p.m. on Friday.
That's crazy, right? Man, the internet is nuts, man. It's, well, like I said, I'm going to go put my kids to bed. I thank you so much.
Yeah, we totally lost you saying goodbye.
I know. Yeah. Well, hey, thank you so much, Brett. I appreciate it. Let's stay in touch. I hope our paths cross over in your neck of the woods one of these days.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your time, mate. Go and look after your children, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much, Brett. See you, buddy.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye. All right, guys, that's wrapped it up, and we'll let Wes put his family to bed, and we'll go and do some more work. Everyone who's up at Summer Nats, be safe, have fun, and make sure that you support drag racing around Australia. We've got a lot happening over the next couple of weeks. Willowbanks this weekend, Sydney in 2 weeks, and Calder the week after. So that's it. We'll sign off and talk to you next week. Ciao, guys.